This is what we used to do to turn something on or off. A simple switch. Click on, click off. But what used to be a binary gesture has now turned into this. A symphony of real-time physical simulations. Glass refractions with chromatic aberration. Three-dimensional icons that dance when you touch them. And bouncy animations for every damn button. We finally moved on from boring minimalist flat design, and I have to admit, it looks incredible. But I'm sorry, no matter how spectacular this whole visual circus may seem, what it's really showing us is that the user interfaces we've used for the last 40 years are dead. And the very same companies that are studying the laws of physics to make a more satisfying switch are the ones, behind the scenes, trying to eliminate the graphical interface altogether. They want to replace it with this. Walls of black and white text generated by artificial intelligence that, ironically, look exactly like the command line. The very thing that existed right before we invented graphical interfaces. While all the attention is focused on the shine of glass and reflections, behind the scenes, we're going back to the drawing board to reinvent how we'll interact with technology in the future. It seems like we're at the pinnacle of design, but in reality, we're attending a funeral, the funeral of the user interface as we know it. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to tell you the story of this murder in 5 acts, revealing why the companies that spend the most on making a beautiful button are the same ones secretly digging their own grave. It all started in a place that looked more like a hippie retreat for engineers than a high-tech laboratory. Xerox PARC in the 70s. Before them, using a computer was like trying to give orders to a grumpy genie who only spoke in an arcane dialect. You would type cryptic commands on a black screen with green letters, and if you made a syntax error, the machine would coldly insult you with a syntax error. It wasn't for everyone. In fact, it was hardly for anyone at all. But then, these people at Xerox had a revolutionary idea. What if, instead of typing, we could just point? That's how the graphical user interface, or GUI, was born, with its windows, its icons, and most importantly, the mouse. It was the first time technology bent down to speak our language, the visual language. A young Steve Jobs visited that laboratory in 1979, and let's just say he left there with some very deep inspiration. A few years later, in 1984, Apple launched the Macintosh and the world changed. Suddenly, you didn't need a PhD to use a computer. You could double-click on a folder, drag a file to the trash. It was intuitive. It was magical. From a marketing perspective, this was a masterstroke. The GUI wasn't just a technical innovation, it was the greatest customer acquisition tool in history. It broke down the barrier to entry for millions of people, creating a massive market where before there had only been a niche of specialists. But that honeymoon of clicks and windows couldn't last forever. It started to get bloated, and so we entered the era of software morbid obesity. Once everyone got used to clicking, companies faced a new problem. How do I convince you to buy the new version of my program if the old one already does everything you need? The answer was simple and terrible, by adding more features and more and more. The perfect example is Microsoft Word. It's estimated that the average user uses less than 10% of its features. The other 90% is a museum of buttons and menus that no one has ever visited. It's like ordering a coffee and being brought an industrial espresso machine with a 500-page manual. I just wanted caffeine, not a PhD in aerospace engineering. This feature bloat or feature creep became the standard business model to justify an annual subscription or a $99 upgrade. Companies needed to demonstrate added value. The problem is that, in the world of software, adding doesn't always mean improving. Every new button, every new option, added a layer of complexity. The user experience, the famous UX, started to suffer. The software became slow, confusing, and overwhelming. We were creating incredibly powerful tools that most people were unable to use to their full potential. And just when our applications were about to burst from an excess of buttons, a minimalist savior arrived. Or so we thought. Fed up with the clutter, the design world went on a diet. A strict diet called flat design. Around the year 2013, led by Apple's radical redesign with iOS 7, the industry abandoned skeuomorphism, that style that made buttons look like real buttons and notepads have a fake leather cover. Suddenly, everything was clean, crisp, and abstract. Gradients, shadows, and textures were banished. It was as if the entire tech industry had gone on a Marie Kondo retreat and thrown away everything that didn't spark visual joy, even if that sometimes included the very logic of how to use something. From a marketing standpoint, it was an absolutely brilliant move. Overnight, every phone and app that wasn't flat looked like a relic from a past decade. A cycle of perceived obsolescence was created that had nothing to do with functionality, but purely with aesthetics. You were forced to update just to avoid feeling outdated. A philosophy of modernity, of simplicity, was being sold, but it was an illusion. The complexity didn't disappear, it simply hid behind hamburger menus and invisible gestures. Feature bloat was still there, but now it was wearing tighter clothes. Beneath the minimalist rug, the monster of complexity kept growing. And then, artificial intelligence, which had been working out for years, decided it was time to take the stage. For decades, the idea of talking to your computer was science fiction, or at best, a frustrating experience with voice assistants that barely understood if you asked them for the weather or to call your aunt. But then, at the end of 2022, ChatGPT arrived and changed everything. 100 million users in 2 months, the fastest growing tech product in history. Suddenly, conversation worked. You could ask it to write you an email, explain quantum physics to you as if you were 5 years old, or create a business plan for you. The paradigm shifted. Before, to complete a complex task, you had to learn the software interface. Now you just had to describe what you wanted. The difference in experience is striking. Searching for a flight on a traditional travel website involves a dozen clicks. Origin, destination, dates, layovers, filters, sorting by price. It's like filling out a B-27 form at a government office. With AI, you simply say, find me the cheapest flight to Tokyo for the last week of March, non-stop and not departing before 9 in the morning. The difference is fundamental. From a marketing and consumer economics perspective, the focus shifts from optimizing the click path to understanding user intent. Customer acquisition costs could plummet. Why spend millions on ads if you have an assistant that recommends the perfect product at the exact moment you need it? But here's the plot twist. AI is brilliant at listening, but terrible at showing. And that brings us to the final act of this drama. The big problem with chatbots is that their output is just a wall of text. It's like going back to the command line. If you ask an AI to compare 3 flight options, it will give you a list, but a good graphical interface would show you a comparison table with prices in red, durations as progress bars, and the best options highlighted. Our brains are visual machines. GIS are great for displaying information in a dense and understandable way. AIs are great at receiving complex and ambiguous instructions. The conclusion is obvious: a forced marriage between the two. And we're already seeing the 3 phases of this union. The first phase, which already exists, is the chatbot in a sidebar. You have your usual application on the left and a chat window on the right. You ask it for things and the application updates. It's useful but clumsy. It's like having a driver and a co-pilot shouting instructions at each other. The second phase, which is just starting to appear, is much more elegant. It's the integrated conversational interface. Imagine a video editing program with hundreds of buttons. Instead of searching for them, you press a microphone button and say, cut this scene, add a smooth transition, raise the audio a bit, and put in suspenseful music. And you watch as the interface obeys in real time. And speaking of that, when I don't want to mess with keyboards or menus, I use Whisperflow.ai. I speak into the microphone and that's it. It transcribes perfectly in seconds. It polishes the text if needed, corrects accents, and leaves it ready on the screen to send anywhere. An email, a comment, a message. It saves me hours and honestly has boosted my productivity tenfold. It's one of my favorite AI tools right now. If you feel like trying it, I'll leave the link in the pinned comment of the video. The buttons are still there, giving you control and visual feedback, but the main command is your voice. And then there's the third phase, the end game, the true death of the interface as a static object. In this future, there will be no pre-designed interfaces. When you open an app, it will be practically blank. You'll simply say what you need. I want to organize my vacation to Italy, and the AI won't reply with text. It will generate a custom interface for you right then and there, with a map, a calendar, a budget manager, and hotel suggestions. A perfectly tailored interface to your intention that will disappear when you're done. Designers will no longer draw rectangles in Figma. They'll write the rules so the AI knows when to generate a map instead of a list, or a button instead of a slider. It's the pinnacle of personalization. So no, the user interface isn't dying in the sense that it's going to disappear. It's transforming into something more like a fluid than a rock. We're moving from being operators of a machine to being directors of an incredibly competent assistant. The era of clicking is ending and the era of dialogue is beginning. The big question is, are we ready to stop using software and start having conversations with it? Which app drives you crazy with its interface and makes you wish it just had a single button that understood you? Let me know in the comments. I'm really interested to hear. By the way, don't forget to check out the pinned comment on the video. Speaking of how great technological ideas sometimes end up creating monsters of complexity and broken business models, it really reminds me of what happened with streaming. We thought it was the future of television, the ultimate in simplicity and access, but it's turned into a maze of subscriptions, cancellations, and disappearing content. If you want to understand why that promise of an entertainment paradise actually turned into a monumental mistake, I've left a video right here that's going to blow your mind. I'll see you there.